What's up, guys? Fabrication video, the longest welded countertop I've ever done. It's 20 feet. 14 gauge, number 4 polished. Did it in 2 sections. Down here is where I welded it. Still see a little tiny bit right there. And of course the sides. And a little bit here. I'm going to give a couple more passes and let it cool down and finish it out in the morning. Just got to go real slow. This has to be as completely flat as possible, and I got to polish it out to match this grain, and do a little bit at a time to take this weld down and blend this in, because you do not want to warp this with a grinder. You warp it with a grinder, there goes a ton of money in material. All right, well, we've reached the part where we're going to glue the tops down for my customer. They're ready. We went and got them. And where I originally started was I tacked this piece together, and I'm just gonna grind down anything that may interfere with us gluing down the tops, and then we're gonna glue them down and put weight on them, let them sit for a few days. Well, we got the first layer of substrate on this counter, and it's been sitting here with the glue for several days, and we got clamps on it. We're about to flip it over and support it and polish out where I welded it. And just a little nervous, because usually I would be installing this and it's going to get out of here and somebody else is going to install it, to where I would have all the substrate down in place and then glue it in place and clamp it and like I put some argon bottles on it to just help it stay down. But they're coming to get it tomorrow morning, so here we go. All right, we're getting to the polishing stage. So, you know, this stainless has a grain in it. And they call it a number 3 or a number 4 polish. And what they do is the stainless come out as a mill finish. It's just kind of gray, and they run it through a giant machine that's, say, a lathe, like how you trim down wood. This is the same kind of concept, but it has a giant one of these on it, and it puts what they call this number 3, number 4 polish, which is basically 80 grit sandpaper, and they just put a grain on it, and then they wrap the sheets. They put the sheets in PVC to kind of protect it. Well, once I've welded this together, you can see what it does. And then you can get these Tiger Disc wheels now at even Home Depot, which are really good for taking down welds or grinding anything that you want to, right on down to using them on wood. But I took an 80 grit Tiger Disc and took down the weld a little bit at a time to keep the heat off it. And I got a couple little spots, right here that I didn't want to dig too deep, because I'm going to take this Walter grinder, and this, you can't buy this at Home Depot. This machine, for a grinder, it's pretty expensive, but for this application, it works really well. And this is a sandpaper disc, and this little unit that's on here now is like an inflatable wheel, and you put as much pressure in it as you want. And this thing has such a large, smooth, variable speed. It'll run like that all day, or you can speed it up as much as you want to. And now what I'm going to do is try to put this grain back in it this way, a little bit at a time. And I'm starting with an 80. I do have some 60s, and I got 120s. And when I get it close, and I'll take a blending wheel of that Scotch-Brite and go out and keep breaking it back until it's fairly unnoticeable. And this going in a restaurant, but I'm doing this for another customer. They may want me to blend the whole top, which takes a couple hours. I'll show you how this. Just gently put it on here, and you'll see here in just a minute how it almost immediately starts putting that grain back into the material. If you go too heavy and scratch it too deep, then it's harder to get out. But you wouldn't think so, but it can be kind of a pain in the ass. So you see that right there, just with that little bit of going back and forth, where my inconsistencies with the weld and the grinder, you can still see them, but that one pass, you see how it starts putting this grain back in. And I'll bust it down with the 80 and then go to the 120 and then peel this back. And the trick to this PVC is a thin piece of copper. You can cut this like if you took a razor knife to it, you're going to scratch the grain, but a piece of copper will not harm the stainless. And that's the trick. Depending on how fancy it's got to be, that's how much time you spend on that grinder by hand. So these are what these things look like. They look like miniature belt sanding belts. So I'm changing this over to 120 grit. And you deflate this thing, shove on a new one, put the pump to it. That's what holds it on there. So there you can see it. Just got to do that edge. This one's hanging over to the side so I can break it down more. But this is with the 80 grit. So now I'm going to go after it with a 120. And you just kind of break it back a little more. And eventually this one here has 80 grit sandpaper, but it's got Scotch-Brite in there too. And then I got one that's just full Scotch-Brite. And I didn't buy anything last time. They actually make wheels like this one that are Scotch-Brite. So they make tons of shit for this Walter. And you'll see immediately.
Well, be on.
Well, right in here somewhere is where the weld used to be, about right there. I got to blend the rest of the top, let it sit on the glue over the weekend, and it'll go out the door. Stainless steel 20-foot countertop.